Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. My name is Scott Barker. I will actually not be moderating this discussion. I had to change my talk track there a little bit. We've got an amazing moderator for you. I'm going to be more of color commentary on this one, which I'm super excited about. I don't always get to add my opinions. Sometimes I just guide the discussion. So I'm excited to throw some of those in there. And we've got a really, really cool presentation for you today. A lot of times we're talking through things and we're having roundtables and we're talking about opinions. Today we've got some hard data and some hard research for you. This has never been shared before. This is the first time anyone is getting this information. So first off, I want to thank Chorus and you, Natalie, for sharing this with the Sales Hacker community. This is huge and excited to dive into it. So what we're talking about is how to win more deals in 2020 with the top sales secrets of 2019. So I'll let Natalie talk a little bit more about where this research is coming from, but there's a lot in here. And we've only got probably about 45 minutes of content plus 15 minutes of Q&A. So I want to dive right into it. Before I introduce my two awesome guests, really quickly, just some housekeeping items. So number one, this is recorded. So we always record these. So if you got to jump off, you got to go to a client meeting, you got to do what you got to do, no worries. We'll send this out within 24 hours. Number two, we do these for the community. This isn't just us to create content for the sake of creating content. We're doing this to hope that you get better at your role. And so we want to hear from you. We want to hear from the challenges that you're having. So go down, there's a little Q&A section at the bottom. If you want to introduce yourself right now, name, title, where you're from, we'd love to hear from you. And then if you have any relevant questions throughout, please do ask them. I'll do my best to kind of keep an eye on them and weave in relevant questions throughout, and then we'll leave some time for a Q&A at the end. And then last item is, because you registered for this webinar, Chorus is going to be nice enough to actually send you out this report as well when it's live, which will be, I believe it's next week. So everyone will be getting this. So it's really cool, and it's cool how they've done it as well. Natalie can explain more. But essentially, built a web-based report that provides sales benchmarks, leveraging 5 million sales calls that they analyze. 5 million. So lots of takeaways, but what I want to do is introduce my awesome guests. First, we'll start with Natalie Severino. Natalie, welcome to the community.
Thank you. So happy to be back with Sales Hacker and really excited to share some of this research to help all of you guys crush your goals next year.
Me too. We had a little pre-webinar call and I was oddly silent, and those who know me know I'm not that silent all the time. And I was just like taking in all of the information, and it was pretty cool. There's a lot in here, and just some quick background on Natalie. So Natalie is the VP of Marketing over at Chorus. Previous to that, has held Global VP role of Client and Product Marketing at DHI Group, and also VP of Marketing at Get Talent. So been in the marketing executive arena for a while. And we've also got my boy, always love hanging out with you, Gabe Villamazar. Gabe, welcome, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me, Chorus, and everybody. So I'm excited to be here again.
Excited to have it. Yeah, I think we're going to need to send you some Sales Hacker swag, man. I'll make you an ambassador. You show up in this community a lot, and I like it.
No, I've received great feedback, and when Natalie invited me, I jumped on. I mean, we're a Chorus customer.
Nice.
And when I was like, "Hey, would you want to join us?" It was like I texted them an instant yes. So I didn't even know what we were going to talk about. I just said yes. Meeting with Chorus, since we're a customer, so I'm excited to dive into this, data and kind of share our thoughts from Lucidchart and what we've seen here. So.
Yeah, I love it. And those of you who don't know Gabe, maybe you live under a rock, maybe you've never been on LinkedIn before. Gabe is the global sales evangelist at Lucidchart. previous head of, are you currently the head of B2B marketing as well at LucidChart, or was that your previous title?
Oh man, I'd be going crazy if I had both roles.
I thought so. I thought so. Also advisory council, Digital Marketing Institute, and you advise at various startups. So you're a busy guy. You got a lot going on, and excited to dive into it. So
sweet.
I guess without further ado, Natalie, I'm going to pass the reins off to you, and let's kick this off.
All right. So as Scott shared, we analyzed over 5 million calls across various stages in the sales process across 300 plus high growth sales organizations. And one of the things that I'm excited about is that we actually segmented the data because we really believe that context matters. So we have things that are pulled out by SMB, by mid-market, by enterprise selling. And so the first place that I thought I'd start, Scott and Gabe, is, what do you think some of the key differences would be, let's say, between an SMB sale and an enterprise sale?
Gabe, you want to talk about one?
Yes, so just deal cycle. I mean, the length of the deal cycle, like how long is it? Is it a 1-day close? Is it a 7-day close? Is it an enterprise might take, 6 to 18 months. It depends on which vertical you're selling into, depends on how many existing users there are of your product or service at the company. Is it a net new deal? Is it a renewal? Is it an upsell or expansion into a different department? But it's very crucial to know the differences of, for us here at LucidChart, of the length of the deals, the length of the deal cycle or the deal size. So we understand how much energy and how much effort we need to put into those deals.
Yeah, and then from my end, there's a few other things, and I agree with everything you said there, Gabe. Also, like number of stakeholders involved is a big one. SMB, you're probably going to have less people involved. Enterprise, you could have, 8 to 15 stakeholders you have to get in front of. I think there's a few, even like how much you use personalization versus automation on these. Like SMB deals, you can have more of kind of like a cut and dry process that you walk them through every time, versus enterprise, you're going to have to be much more fluid. You're going to have to be able to build that relationship slower over time. So those are just a few, but I could go on and on, I think.
Yeah, exactly right. Which is why I'm so excited about what we've done. Today, we're mostly going to be looking at some differences between like SMB and enterprise. And we went and we dissected data across different parts of the sales cycle. So we looked at things overall. What does it look like during SDR cold calling, during discovery, during late stage deals, and then actually even some insights around what happens post-sales in CSM meetings. However, with the full report that Scott alluded to that's going to be available next week, I'm super excited about what we've done because, first off, this is just some of the insights that are in here. There's actually much more that's available that will be in the full experience. And we've created this interactive web experience where you're going to be able to go in and answer some key questions like, what's your average deal size? What's your sales cycle? How many sales reps do you have? And then what things do you know or not know about these parts of the sales cycle? And we're going to provide to you a custom report that shows you how you measure up against others that are in the same spot. So you don't want to be comparing yourself. If you're in SMB sales, you don't want to be comparing yourself against enterprise because the findings wouldn't be relevant. And so we really wanted to bring all of that context to you, which we haven't really seen done before. So as I said, we're super excited. And as Scott mentioned, after the webinar, we're going to send you an email with a link where you can sign up for early access. And then as soon as it pushes live, we'll let you know and you can kind of dig into all of that. And, when you hear that, Gabe, I know I gave you a little preview of some stuff, but why do you...
We were lucky enough, sorry to interrupt you, but we were lucky enough to have, this data presented to us. So thank you so much for giving us a sneak preview. I shared it with our sales team here internally. It's a benchmark that showed data on like, hey, how fast, how long are we taking in these discovery calls? How much is our talk time? And we'll deep dive into those details. I don't want to give all the secret sauce away right now, but it was such valuable data that it just gave us an aha moment as to how we can improve, right? In every sales activity, every sales effort that our SDRs, AEs, even TSMs could be improving on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to reiterate how cool I think this concept is, because there's always benchmark reports that come out, and quite frankly, if you look at it through the lens of what we're talking about, it kind of can really skew the findings, right? When you have enterprise and SMB just bunched into the same report, and then you have a bunch of people going like, oh, we're way ahead, or oh, we're way behind, and it's because doesn't have the nuances of the different things. So I think it's really cool the way that you've done it. And so you could actually go, if you're an SMB company that is, focused on this industry, you could actually go to this report and find out how you stack up against other companies, which I think is so cool and would have been invaluable when I was leading BD teams. That's for sure.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive in a little bit. So we're going to first start by looking just at the overall sales cycle and what it looks like end to end. So one of the first things that we pulled out is that, from the first call all the way through closing a deal, on average, it was about 90 days. But the enterprise segment took about 40% longer at 130 days or more. And then the number of interactions that it took from calls and meetings with the sales team also was about 40% more. Gabe, you already alluded to the fact that, when you're talking about enterprise, it's kind of different than SMB. So, I don't think that there's a big surprise here, but what do you think drives that?
I would say the number of stakeholders. You have to involve so many different, you have to deal with sometimes champions, blockers, influencers, mobilizers, as a challenger sale or a Gartner now involved. And not only that, but let's say once you get in a contract, an agreement, or legal, things have to bounce back and forth. The bigger the organization, the more opinions, the more people have to be involved. And that delays the whole process, right? Versus if you're talking to an SMB, maybe you just have to talk to legal, procurement maybe, and then the decision maker, that's it, bam, and it's a 12-day close, SMB. An enterprise here, it doesn't surprise me, and it's spot on that you need to involve more decision makers, more influencers, and more buyers, right? Early on throughout the whole entire process, which more people means more communication, more touch points. Therefore, it's going to be a longer sales cycle. That's what comes to mind right now. What about you, Scott?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, how I would coach against this data would just be like, if you're in the enterprise side of things, don't be scared of lengthening the deal, right? Like, it's okay to layer on some complexity, because if you're not the one actively going out and seeking the other people, they're going to be thrust upon you anyway. So just getting ahead of the complexity and knowing that it's okay that these are going to be longer is kind of my findings of this. But it's super interesting, and when you look at the number of interactions 11 interactions in closed won deals, that's a lot. And so that would be like meetings held then, just to clarify?
Meetings or phone calls. Yep.
Yeah.
So then you layer on marketing touches and emails and everything else, and it, again, becomes more complex.
And it also gives you visibility of expectations. Don't expect both from the sales rep and from the sales manager, a one call close, or end of the quarter comes, let's close it. You're only on the 5th interaction, and you're supposed to be at least 10 or more. So, you want to jeopardize the deal just to close it, even though it hasn't had its, traditional course. Yeah. It's good to just have visibility and set expectations with this type of data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so then the next question that we asked is, along those lines is, how is that time broken out and those touches being spread across the journey? And 2 big things jumped out to me. One is that it took 96 days to close won a deal, and it took 87 days to move to close loss. So not a big difference there. And then the second thing is that discovery on average takes about 9 days and 1 to 2 meetings, but 4 days shorter when the deal is lost. So Scott, what does that tell you?
Yeah, well, that tells me that we need to be spending more time on our discovery, which, I think it's so nice to see the data, because it's something that you can say all the time. But almost slowing down to speed up. This is what I would say is, up front, slow down, take your time, ask the hard questions. You may actually it's okay to lengthen the discovery. You do want to lengthen the discovery. So don't let them bull rush past you before you have all the information, because if you slow down at that point, it's actually going to speed it up in the later stages.
Gabe, what about you?
No, spot on. I think echoing what he said, just do a good job and do not rush the discovery. And that requires coaching, obviously, and patience, and a cadence and a playbook, and a lot of other things that, I'm excited to dive into the next slides, but it's such a crucial component, because that sets also the tone of the customer experience, that discovery. It's like, are you adding value? Are you asking the right questions? Are you identifying pain points, et cetera? Crappy discovery calls just screw everything, the rest of the sales cycle, and you could be wasting your time.
Yeah.
I'll add one thing. Just if you think about investing 87 days in a closed loss deal and 96 days in a closed won deal, think about all the time that you're wasting that you could be spending on a deal that's more likely to progress. And so my big encouragement would be, it's just as important as a seller to qualify a deal out as it is to qualify a deal in. And that's why discovery is so important.
Yeah.
Well said. Yep. Absolutely.
And then my last point there, I used to have a VP of sales say that you'll have to ask the hard questions eventually anyway. So you might as well do them up front, and then it's going to inform your sales cycle, versus having to ask the hard question at the end when you find out you've spent 87 days and then you go, oh, you spent all your budget this quarter? Oh, no. So ask the hard questions up front, because you're going to have to ask them anyway, and save yourself 87 days.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so then we wanted to look at the overall funnel, and here's what we found. It takes 106 dials to book one meeting. Of those meetings, only 32% of them actually progress to an opportunity, and then only 19% overall for a win rate. So one of the things I love is when sales really know and understand their sales math and get disciplined about understanding what it takes to hit the quota. Gabe, how would you take this data and work with reps at Lucidchart?
I mean, I would say one aspect that relates directly to Lucidchart is that 11% no-show. An example, if you know 11% are going to no-show, how can you reduce that percentage by sending an e-gift, Starbucks coffee email, instead of just saying, hey, just checking in this morning, make sure that our 1 p.m. demo is still on. Instead of saying that, the traditional, up and coming, demo that's going to happen, say, happy Monday. I know you're getting your week started. Here's an e-gift card for Starbucks coffee. Talk to you at 1. Bam. Just be different. How can you reduce, right? Choose one of these metrics and improve, benchmark yourself, and then say, okay, how can I increase that percentage if it's beneficial, or reduce that percentage? One that stands out to me, like I said, it's the 11% no-show. Sometimes it might be higher, lower, it depends, but it's a good number to just see on a screen, on a piece of paper, have visible. So that way, hey, you set that appointment. Good. Thumbs up. Kudos to you. Now, how can you decrease and make sure it really holds? Because you know how much time marketing put into this to get that lead. You know how much time you actually maybe put if you went outbound on it. You know how much time, we're paying you to be here, opportunity cost, and you better do everything you can to make that no-show percentage to be like 1% instead of 11.
Yeah.
What about you, Scott?
Yeah. So from if I was looking at this and I was on this webinar and I was an individual contributor, I would be, hopefully you know your sales math. If you don't know your sales math, go find it out, and then put your sales math against this. So if you are making 106 dials and you're not getting a meeting, well, what that tells me is maybe you're calling the wrong people. So it might be that your ICP is wrong. It might be that your data is bad. It might mean that you need to get a new data vendor. It might be that your talk track is off. It could be a whole slew of things. But if you're not getting at least one meeting out of 106 dials, diagnose that problem. If that's okay, move to the next one. And if out of those meetings, 32% aren't becoming opportunities, well, you need to figure out why. You need to figure out, are you just berating them with questions and you're not weaving it in a nice way of qualifying someone and they're getting turned off. And essentially use this to diagnose where you need to get better, right? If maybe you have way more than 11% no-shows and that is an issue for you. Well, if you have more than 11%, you need to look at why that is and set up safeguards so that doesn't happen. And then, if you're creating all these opportunities, maybe you create, way more than 32% go, but then you have less than 19% won. Well, then, you've got a closing issue. So you need to work on your negotiation skills. You need to work on that. So if I was looking at this, it's basically a way, it's like going to the doctor's office. You can go against this and this will help you be prescriptive into where you need to get better.
Speaking of doctors, there's a quote, Rob Jepson always says, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice.
Yeah.
You're pretty much prescribing your sales team. Let's say you're a sales manager saying, we need to get better at this, this, and that. Okay. Before diagnosing, right. It's malpractice essentially. So looking at this, right, and inputting your data into an ROI calculator as such that Chorus is going to share and have made available for us starting next week from the day of this webinar, went live. It's just that prescription, it's getting a peek underneath the hood and seeing, okay, what is wrong with this engine or what is wrong with the patient? And then, seeing where can we improve. But
yeah,
like that quote came to mind since you said doctor, Scott. So.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, this is how you can diagnose yourself and then prescribe yourself the right medication. Exactly. So you're not just eating all the medication. This is helpful. The other interesting thing I thought about this is I think we have an industry problem of negotiating here, because if we're putting opportunities at 25K and you're getting dwindled down to 16 and a half, that's a pretty big jump to me. I thought it would be the other way because we've got all these add-ons. You can do multi-year. It's crazy. It seems like we've got an industry it's a bad drop in their pants, it looks like. So I think we all need to get better as sales.
Yeah, that's almost 10K drop. So let's say your monthly recording number is like 30K, then you better, set the opportunity or project or communicate. It's going to be try to sell this much to then minus 10K or whatever it is in your ROI benchmark. And then so that way you can hit that number and hit your company number as well.
Yeah. Well, that's where the sales math comes into play, where it's so important. Like, what your quota is, what your win rate is. So therefore, how many deals you need to get, what's your conversion, how many meetings do you need? Like, you can back it all the way out. And then to your point, like, once you kind of know what that looks like, then you can start fine tuning and optimizing across the different spots to really make sure that you're able to knock it out of the park.
Yeah, for sure. And Natalie, we just have a question here that is just a clarifying question. The data here, is it for inside sales only? Is this just from inside sales, or is this inside and outside sales?
It's basically, it's across more than 300 companies that are doing sales over screen share and over phone. So okay. it would be inside.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Michelle. Good question.
Good question. All right. So now let's dig into cold calling a little bit. So when prospecting, one of the things that we found was that on average, a cold call lasts just over 2 minutes, but a successful cold call actually lasts about 7.5 minutes. And so my question to you guys is, what's your favorite strategy for getting the prospect engaged on a cold call? And what would be the wrong way to lengthen that call?
So, in after our prep webinar meeting from a few days ago, I went up to our SDR manager, Ruby Earl. She's like amazing. She's that type of, employee and team member that just does everything right. And she's right out of college and she's been killing it. She's been promoted super fast. She informed me, we have about 20 or so SDRs. We're about a company of 600 employees. Our sales force is about 150 or so. This includes, and we have a specialized model, setters, closers, and then CSMs, right? So she informed me that actually for us, our successful cold call rate is about 10 to 12 minutes. So it's way higher. And I said, wow, are you serious, Ruby? So what's your secret sauce? What are you doing? So she spent literally 40 hours creating this playbook, step by step, obviously in Lucidchart or in whatever software you want to use. I don't care. Just visual sticky notes, whatever you want, to kind of pretty much just say, okay, this is what happened. These are the questions you need to ask. And she showed me this huge flow chart with all these colorful things. And I'm like, Ruby, I'm not going to read all this, and I'm not going to talk about this in the webinar. I'm just going to speak to it. But it's crazy that she literally put 40 hours to make sure their successful cold calls were longer, than the average, and therefore they're 10 to 12 minutes. And it's like, okay, so you have to put in the time. You have to create a talk track. You have to create some sort of playbook and talking points that add value, that identify pain, and that reduce risk for when buyers are making decisions. So that way, when brand new SDRs come and they're doing cold calls, once the buyer picks up, usually this super successful executive, and they're like, who am I talking to? A 21 or 19-year-old SDR? Are you kidding me? You want me to do business with you? They can sound more educated and actually have a successful business conversation.
Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. I know there's a lot of people that push back on scripts and stuff. I think you need some sort of framework.
Framework, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. But a framework, exactly.
Yeah. A framework for success. And to me, the wrong way to think of it too is you're going to get to the 7.5 minutes because you have an awesome script that you talk for 7.5 minutes. That's not how you're going to get there. Well, how you're going to get there is quite the opposite, is less talking, more question asking, and getting the like ideally you get, in a perfect world, the prospect is talking the whole time and telling you about their pain and their challenges. So that is your job. What you don't want to do is, and I've been there when I think about being a BDR only, 4.5 years ago, you just black out and you feature and benefit dump. And then you think you're just throwing, spaghetti at the wall and you're hoping that something sticks and that they'll go, oh, you mentioned that feature. It just so happens. Like, that's not how it works. So asking thoughtful questions and getting them to speak is how you're going to move from 132 seconds to 7.5.
That's exactly right. The goal here is not to go on a 7-minute monologue. So when we looked at what the successful cold calls were, some of the things that we found was that the reps were only talking about 44% of the time. The longest monologue that they had was only 40 seconds. And what they were really focused on was not only asking questions, so there are 4 to 5 questions asked in the call, but actually getting the buyer engaged. So specifically making sure that there was one engaging moment that then led to the prospect also asking questions of the rep. Guys, do you have like a favorite question or a favorite way of doing this when you're doing cold calls?
I've got a little tip that I'll share that I've actually shared with Course before in one of their ebooks that they did. And it's actually when it's going unsuccessful. So when you get brushed off, which happens a lot in cold calls, and you'll just get the classic, hey, sorry, not interested. Well, they didn't even hear what you said. They just recognized that you were a cold caller and they're shutting you down. So something that worked very successful for me and also my team back in the day was when they say that, you kind of fall on your sword and you say, okay, no problem. Hey, listen, I'm really, really trying to get better at this. Is there anything that I could have said or done that would have resulted in you taking a meeting with me? And you'll get one of 2 responses. Number 1, you'll get, honestly, man, I didn't even hear what you were selling. What are you talking about again? And then you get to say your value prop again in a non-combative atmosphere, and they're actually listening this time. And then there's a much better chance that it's going to progress to the next stages. Or they'll just give you feedback. And they'll be like, man, you were mumbling the whole time and you were talking a million miles a minute. I had no idea what you're saying. And then at least you get some free feedback and you can apply that to your next call. So that's one of my favorite questions ever to ask in cold call. I recommend everyone tries it. It can help turn a few of those ones that are going south into ones that have next steps.
One that comes, no, I love that one, Scott. That's good. I'm going to share that one with our team here. One that comes to mind is, let's say if you're talking to your buyer and you're like, hey, which CRM are you using? That's pretty much a one-word answer if they were using a CRM. Whereas if you say, can you help me understand, right? Or can you help me understand how you're using a CRM? That, and it's all about your tone of voice, obviously. Can you help me understand which CRM you guys are using in-house to, store all your data, or, or et cetera? Instead of saying, which CRM are you using? It's a closed-ended question. It's going to lead to a dead end. But once you say, could you help me understand how you guys are using your CRM? It's like more of a like, okay, hopefully the buyer will give some thought to it. And it's not going to be a one-word answer. It's going to give you more words that you can then dissect, listen, and then return back with another question based on what they said.
Love that. That's great. So one of the other things that came up that was a little bit counterintuitive or a little bit more on the provocative side is that pricing actually does come up on cold calls, and sometimes more than once. And so, why do you think that is, and how would you suggest that somebody handle that when it comes up on a cold call? Scott, let's start with you.
Yeah, so for this one, first take this knowledge and figure out a plan internally, right? Everyone's going to have unique pricing, and everyone's going to have a unique way they want to handle it. But know that that it's going to come up. So just by knowing this ahead of time, you can then put together a plan. I don't think you want to give out pricing on the cold call. I think you're setting yourself up to be burned later, especially if you're talking to a savvy buyer, because if you give a range, they're going to hold you to the low end. I know I would as a buyer. So you need to work internally with how you kind of deflect this question. And I think it's hard to put a generic, here's how to answer pricing, because I think it's unique to your business. But what I would say is, knowing this, if your organization doesn't have a plan to address pricing on a cold call, you need to work with your BD manager or your team to come up with one.
Yeah, along the same lines, I think you have to have a plan, and in that framework that Ruby, our SDR manager, put together, there is, okay, these are the objections, these are the questions that a successful cold call might come up, a question, and then she has on there, okay, specific talking points. It's like, hey, I would love to give you pricing, but to be fair for both you and me, I'd like to set you up with a more experienced account manager that's dedicated to your account, that can exactly give you the integrations. Because if I tell you a price right now, then it's gonna, it's not gonna be fair for you or me, because I don't really know exactly where your needs are. Because I know I don't want to take more of your time. I know you have to go, but you know what? Let me just let's find a few moments, and then et cetera. So find talking points of how to, if that's the case for you and your business exactly, that you want to go that route. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think Gabe's totally right. You can almost play, it's not playing dumb, but you almost play like naive or something. You're just kind of like, hey, like, I'm just, I'm here to be a first step. I don't want to misinform you. We have an account executive where his sole job is to diagnose and be prescriptive with our clients, and he's going to be able to do a much better job than I am.
And that's what's worked for us. Exactly. And if this might not work for the listeners live or on demand, but that's what's worked for us, for our model, Lucidchart. And it is true, even, yeah, exactly. Because even it kind of comes off like that, but it's worked out.
Cool. All right. So everybody's favorite, discovery. Such an important part of the sales process. We took a look, and I thought that this was really interesting. When you look at the average versus the successful, a couple of the things that we pulled out is that the successful calls had more stakeholders, so the rep was multi-threading early, and then all of the engagement metrics across the board were more. The meetings were longer, there were more engaging moments, and there were more next steps that were talked about. What does this mean to you guys, and what are the key things that you pull out?
I love it. It's been backing up some of the things I've been saying for years, and the drums I've been beating. The thing that personally, just because it's something that I talk about quite frequently, that stands out to me is the next steps. So you look at the bottom there, successful, you have 5 next steps versus 2 next steps. So what this says to me is successful people are creating a mutual action plan to get this deal closed with the prospect. So they're saying, okay, yes, we're gonna meet in 1 week's time and we're gonna go over the proposal. But after that, and we decide that the proposal's fair and good, then we're gonna loop in your finance team and we're gonna make sure that they're on board with this decision. Even before we get to procurement, I just wanna make sure that we're good there. And then from there, let's loop in, you mentioned this other stakeholder who's gonna be in charge of this integration. That's when we're gonna bring them in, and you're basically like, you're both agreeing to this plan right until the close one day. And you agree this is when it's gonna close, this is when the signature happens, and it's so much more powerful than just doing next step, next step, next step, next step, because you both agree to it. That's the thing that just pops out to me, and would be something, if I was on this webinar, something, if you're not creating mutual success plans with your prospects, I think you should do that immediately, because the data is backing it up.
Yeah, this isn't, spot on, Scott. Like, not enough people are talking about a mutual close plan enough. Just it's such an important thing. Like, I'm going to do this and you can hold me accountable, and I expect you to do this and I'm going to hold you accountable to it. And this is how we progress a deal. It's not just me trying to sell you something. It's like, hey, I don't even know if you're ready for this, this product or service. I'm just trying to understand if our product or service can help you. So if you kind of play like that, I feel like they're more likely to be held accountable, or you can hold them accountable if you set the tone early on that way. I think this needs to be printed. I should print it out large and put it in our sales floor. This slide, screenshot it, or actually download it. Yeah. It just sets the expectation of like, okay, if you're just doing one step, you're even below average. If most of your discovery calls only involve one attendee or one buyer, then you're going to lose. You're setting yourself up for failure. The deal's going to go dark. The deal's going to ghost you. You forecasted it, and then you're going to push it to the next quarter. Why? Well, in every single meeting, even post-discovery, you only had one attendee. What were you thinking? So you can kind of look for clues of why the deal failed, right? Yep. Those certain, triggers and just clues that can allow you to analyze your close loss and your close won deals. That way you can just say, okay, we're below average, we're average, we're successful. And it's hard, it's a lot of practice, a lot of progress. And how can you add more than 2, it's just coaching on these specific talking points. How can you have more 2+ attendees or buyers in a discovery call? Well, you got to multi-thread early on. How do you do that? So coach on that. How do you make the length of the call longer? You have to ask good questions. Well, what are the questions you ask for? Coach on that. How do you we need to have an engaging moment. What is an engaging moment? How do you do that? Coach on that. So it's good for the sales rep and the sales manager to just have these type of visibility and these stats in front of you visible at all times. And I really will. Maybe I'll tweet it once I post it in our sales floor, but it's awesome.
Well, 2 things. One thing that I wanted to make sure that I keyed in on that you mentioned earlier and you mentioned just now is the thing about the stakeholders. I mean, the reality is that every sale is getting more complex in terms of the number of people that you need to bring in to make a decision, generally, especially as you move up market into more complex organizations. And the more that you can gather all the requirements and understand the pain across different stakeholders early, which is what you're trying to do in discovery, the better off you're going to be down the line. So I thought that was great and interesting. And I'm going to go on the fly here. Scott, I saw you taking a picture of the screen, which is why I chuckled. I'm going to call an audible here, and I'll make an offer to everybody on this webinar. If you hit me up on LinkedIn and you write me a note that says why you're hitting me up on LinkedIn, I will print and laminate the slide and send it to anybody that wants it.
Dang, awesome. Natalie, going big. I love it. Dang. Improv. Damn.
Live webinars, baby.
Gabe, I'll make sure that we got something coming your way, so you don't have to go out and do it yourself.
Just a Hawaii trip is fine.
Nice. Okay, so now, also around discovery, there were a couple of the counterintuitive learnings that I just love. There's three up here. I'm going to point out two. One, competition was mentioned 2 times more on won deals, and 50% of the discovery meetings had a discount mentioned by the prospect. Why do you guys think that is? What does that mean to you?
I would say they know what they want, right? They know they've already done their research, and a lot of stats floating around say, you know, most of the sale is almost, you know, 63% complete, 57% complete by the time the first interaction happens. And meaning they've done their due diligence most of the times. Now with data and technology making everything pretty readily accessible, you know, knowledge is not just limited to sales reps. Knowledge is everywhere. Knowledge is, I mean, you'd be stupid if you're not on Google just, you know, searching for stuff. And so because of that, I would say going even back, knowing the stat, even marketing, right, should know the stat. So that way they can create collateral, a comparison chart. That's also another laminate sitting next to a sales rep's desk and saying, this is how we compare to competitor A, B, and C, and there's check marks. Okay. So that way, when these competitors do come up, it's not like, oh, wait, can you guys do this? Last time I checked, yes, but you know what? Let me see if, and they might be testing you. They might know the answer or they might not, but that way you can sound more educated on the spot and know that you're on your A game. Like, you know exactly that you're the best at XYZ and you can add value. So marketing is a huge component. Sometimes sales reps create their own collateral. It's great if you're scrappy enough, if you're a small startup, but you want all of you guys to be orchestrated to sound the same, you know? So.
Yeah. And to me, yeah, like a discount is a very late stage, strong buying signal, right? They're thinking about money. They're thinking about, you know, budget. These are good things. And whatever your company's policy is on discounting, you can do it. But if they're asking that, I'm getting excited because I know that they're serious. And then the competitive mentions, yeah, I mean, if you're going through and you have happy ears on and you haven't heard a competitor and you're like, oh, this is awesome, they don't even know about the competitor, you're kidding yourself, because, you know, the world we live in with G2 Crowd and everything, if they are a serious buyer and a good champion, they're going to find who your competitors are. If they're not looking at least one or two, then I would say that they're not serious.
Yeah. You know, and I think it's just, you know, we'll talk about this in the later stages, but the thing that stood out to me from like hearing this on a discovery call, like we talked earlier about how much time you're investing in the deals that are closed lost versus closed won. Like, this is a clear signal to me that you're not just a tire kicker, you're actually already in a buying consideration process, which, you know, like you, I would be excited by that.
Yep.
Yeah, totally.
All right. So speaking of late stage, let's move down the funnel and talk a little bit about those late stage deals. Now, this is where the data flips. And so now what we're looking for in a later stage deal is fewer questions, fewer competitor mentions, and shorter meetings. So, you know, knowing that, Gabe, like, again, what would you do with this when you're talking to your reps at Lucidchart? This is further down as the deal is advanced. If you found that the reps were, you know, let's say they're still getting tons of questions from the prospect, or they're starting to get more competitor mentions in later stage, what would you do with that information?
I would slap him in the face and and then
lawyer up.
Your freaking discovery sucked. Like sometimes you get so frustrated, and I do all the time. But I'm really nice. I don't want HR to get me in trouble. I've already sometimes been in trouble. But my point is that they did not do it good enough at the discovery call. And that can either fall on them for not following a cadence, a procedure, a process, or that can sometimes fall on the managers because the manager did not set a good playbook based on like what they created or what they coached on. Okay. So discovery, going back to discovery is so important, so crucial, because that sets the tone for the entire the entire sales deal. And they didn't identify, as an example, they didn't identify pain points. They didn't talk about the right value touches that the product or service can bring. They didn't answer the questions the right way. The prospect or buyer might have asked a question, you totally answered a different way. They still have that question 3-4 calls later, and you missed your opportunity. You only have one shot with these deals sometimes. And as things progress, this should be indicators. These should be triggers. These should be digital breadcrumbs that should inform and educate sales reps to say, hey, this deal is almost on fire in a bad way. You better do something.
Yeah. And for me, to go back to the kind of doctor example that we were using before, right? So I think you need to make this jump from the curious professional to the expert professional at some point, right? So imagine you go to a doctor's office and they ask you all these questions up front, and they're like, okay, awesome. So based on that, you're gonna need this shot, and I do it all the time, and you'll be good. And then you're like, okay, I'm confident. That sounds good. This guy knows what he's talking about. And then right before he's gonna put the shot into you, he goes, oh, wait, hold up. Did you say you have headaches? I hope you don't have headaches. And then he's just about to put it, and you're like, whoa, man, like, hold on. Like, yeah, maybe I do have headaches. Like, don't put that thing in. And then, you lose all confidence completely, So you need to make that jump from expert. You should have asked all the questions, and then you should be the consultative expert at that point and not second guessing your prescription.
And even if they want to rush the sale, sometimes the buyer's like, no, I'm ready to buy. I want to buy. And you're like, wait, like, and then you're like, I got to hit my number. I'm short this quarter. Even if they're ready to buy, you should still put them through the process.
Totally.
Those questions sometimes, historically will come up. And what you guys have made here, Natalie, at Core is available. It's going to allow you to see that,
Yeah.
Cool. I love it, Scott. Good example.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Got to get my flu shot now. Hey.
All right, so now I've got one for you on the customer success side. So one of the things that we found is that competitors can still come up post-sale. So if you think about a CSM will typically meet with an account 8 to 10 times in a year. Competitors are coming up once or twice. And the question that raises for me are your CSMs trained? Marketing Gabe, to your point, they put focus and effort into creating battle cards for sellers and making sure that they're trained on the competitors. But are you doing that on the CSM side?
I don't think the CSMs have them. And our product marketing team spent tons of time making them, right? ATL, BTL, we follow the Skip Miller methodology. And they need to be given the love, right? Especially, Scott, as we were talking the other day, he's like, hey, CSM is going to be just as relevant, if not more relevant than the sales team, because they hold so much power in and the relationship of the future of that client for obviously renewing and upselling, right, Scott?
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you're a sales leader listening to this, go see how much revenue is generated with upsells and renewals. And then tell me that your CSMs are not salespeople, because they are. And we treat them differently for some odd reason.
Yes.
But I'm putting a stake in the ground that over the next year or two, CSMs are finally going to get the love they deserve. There's going to be more money flowing into success tech. There's going to be more money in success training. They're probably going to get paid more. And they're finally going to have their time in the light, because people are waking up that a lot of us are SaaS business models, right? And that's the way to build a successful SaaS company, is to reduce churn and do upsells and renewals. And we're not treating them like salespeople yet, but I think it's coming, and you should be.
Great. So I've got one more for you guys as a bonus. So, Harvard Business Review has come out and they've talked about the fact that there's like this big disconnect between a sales manager's perception of how well they coach and the rep's perception of how well they coach. And add to that, there was a study that was done that said that 60% of sellers will leave their job if they feel like they're not getting the coaching that they need. Because ultimately people want to be successful. And one of the things that we found is that managers are really spending time, 60% more time coaching late stage deals than early stage deals. But the top managers that we looked at, the ones that were the most successful, actually coach on 63% of the deals while they're in an early stage. And that translated into a 30% higher win rate. Why do you guys think that is?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, we talked about this in the pre-webinar call. It's this panic feeling that managers get. It's the end of quarter. You need to pull some things up, and you only have an hour a week, so you're going to spend that on the things that are late stage deals that you think you can pull across, and you're barely even coaching at that point. You're just using your knowledge and trying to get the deal done.
And it's force, pretty much.
Yeah, it's brute force, exactly. And it's very difficult to course correct at that point because all of this stuff has already been done. Versus if you catch it early, maybe you can coach them through the discovery process. And we learned from this webinar that if you lengthen that, the chance you're winning is going up. So if you can catch it during that process, you know, it's just going to have such a bigger compounding effect throughout the sales process. So yeah, this is super interesting to see it broken down in data, but I think it's a hypothesis that a lot of us have had. But I guess, Gabe, what do we do about this? Like, how do you have to have specific office hours for coaching? You know, you break your coaching into late stage and early stage and just be super diligent about it? Or
yeah, I would say sometimes a lot of these coaching deals are like a sales rep gets in a room like this and they're like, okay, so how can I help you? Like, what deals do you need me to help you on? Right. Mm-hmm. I believe, and we're starting to see that here at Lucidchart, that coaching needs to be structured, meaning here's the agenda we follow for coaching. Here's how I can help you as a sales manager for coaching. It's not just like hey, let's catch up. Let's drink some freaking kombucha or whatever. And let's just talk about our deals. And let's say, you know, and that's what most of sales coaching sessions, if there's any coaching sessions, are very unstructured. And given it purpose, given it specific tactics, and putting the detailed agenda, following specific, you know, purpose-driven structure of coaching, I think it's going to allow sales reps to really have an impact and it's starting early on. Another fact that comes to mind from Gartner is that not only are we coaching, you know, obviously coaching in like late stages, but imagine if you were to also coach, right, the early stages, middle reps, right? We usually tend to coach the crappy reps, the ones who are not hitting their number. Gartner says that you should also be coaching like your middle reps, like the ones who are average as well. So not only coach, you know, or even the top performers, but coach everybody at an early stage. And imagine how much more of an impact that's going to have on your whole sales number and impact the bottom line. But again, more structure to your coaching and actually early on versus late. I mean, maybe don't get rid of the late stage coaching, but still add a structure component early on and it's systematic. That's what I'd say to that, Scott.
I'll add one more thought, which is when people say that they'll leave a job if they're not getting the coaching that they need, I'm not sure if they're talking about coaching a deal or if they're actually talking about skills development, professional development. And I think that it's really easy to fall into the trap of, we've got these deals, we got to close them, we got to focus on that. But you still have to carve out the time for the skills development for your reps too.
Totally. Huge. I would agree with that. I think when people think of coaching, they feel like it's like career coaching. It's like, how can I up level to the next thing? So it's not just about getting deals done, for sure. Great point.
Yeah. So in summary, I think we went through a lot. We're down to just a couple minutes left on the hour. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, especially since, like we mentioned, all of you guys are going to get a link to the web experience. You'll be able to go through this, plus there's a plethora more that's there, and you'll be able to actually have it customized to your situation. I want to check first, Scott, are there any other questions that we need to address in the Q&A?
We have a quick one on, again, it's kind of clarifying. Interested to see whether there are parallels with outbound sales. Is there similar research available? this was both inbound and outbound sales, correct, Alan?
Correct.
Yeah. Also, are there defined sales processes that I can reference for inbound? I'm not sure I understand the last question, but this is a mixture of both inbound and outbound. So you'll find this data relevant to inbound or outbound sales.
Yeah, I think the thing there, and it's not necessarily going to be reflected in this data because it's impossible for us to really break it out that way. But when I think about an outbound sale, they're less educated than people that are coming inbound and raising their hand. So that means, I would say that means that you need even more time spent both in discovery and during the value stages of your sales cycle, because it's a more evangelical sale where you need to do more educating of the prospect versus when they come in already, like those people that are asking about competitors and discounts, they already kind of know what they're looking for, I would guess.
Totally. Yeah, good call up. And then there is one last question as well. This is for Gabe, and I have a few thoughts here too. Any other tips to reduce no-shows? I know we talked about that 11% no-show. Quickly from my end, Vidyard's a great tool, sending a quick video. It's much harder to do a no-show when you see someone's smiling face, and it kind of humanizes you. And then setting an agenda is big. In your calendar invite, if you send an agenda, there's a lot of times, I'll tell you, where I have random meetings in my calendar that I have no idea what is going on, and there's no details. And I look at and I've got a million things going on, and I'll look and I'll try in my email and be like, I don't even know what this meeting is. And I see there's other people on it. So I'm like, whatever, I'm just not going to go to that one. So setting an agenda is super important. So I know what I'm getting myself into.
No, I like that one. Vidyard. I like also to just obviously do an indirect nudge through LinkedIn. So view their profile early on, they'll get notified. Maybe if you know them from previous interactions or through your network, endorse a skill or two on LinkedIn. That usually nudges them. They're like, oh, wow, but if you don't know them and you do that, you're a creeper. That is BS. Another one could be, obviously, if you want to go above and beyond, send a postcard that, it's going to be delivered there that day. I played around with that. Our team has also done that. And sometimes even donuts just in the morning. But just things that are just very different. I mean, just pretty much eliminate your first or two ideas because everybody else has thought of those two. And then choose the third one. That's when you really are thinking hard and long about it.
There's also SMS. If you have a good conversation with them and you say, hey, do you mind if, I text you just to remind you because I know you're super busy, that's a good one too.
Love it.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. This has been great.
Gabe, Scott, thank you so much for your wise words and participation. And I'm glad that you saw value in the data. And I hope that everybody else that tuned in did and will come and visit and get their own report.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalie. This is amazing. I can't wait to dive in next week and play around with the interactive report. And make sure you connect with Natalie and Gabe on LinkedIn and check out Chorus. Chorus is amazing.